Seasonic, the heart of your system.
I'm Neil Warder for Kit Guru. This chassis is the Phanteks Pro M SE, or Special Edition. I reviewed the original Pro M back in 2015. I reviewed the glass version where they replaced the acrylic side panel with tempered glass. That was 2016. They're still selling Pro M. It was a really good case at the time. I'm looking forward to seeing what I think of it these years later in 2019. And you're going to get the benefit of seeing it this time in 4K rather than full HD. But the changes for the special edition are that the interior is white, the exterior is black, interior white, so you get the contrast thing going on. And also there's a pair of Halos fan frames on the two 140mm fans. You've got some RGB going on up the front. The thing about the RGB to make it work more aesthetically is that the two fans are up the front. They're 140mm fans, premium Phanteks models, instead of having one at the front and one exhaust at the rear, as you might expect to see. Obviously you can move them should you choose. The original Pro M, I liked that case. I still have the original case because I actually used it in my own personal PC for a year or two. So I'm quite familiar with the Pro M, although it's been a while since I've used it, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this special edition fares these days. First thing to do is to remind ourselves about the features of the Phanteks Pro M. The glass panel is retained with thumb screws. With the screws removed, I let go of the glass. It doesn't immediately fall off because it's sitting on these four rubbers. The glass has a tint to it, but it's nothing too dramatic. Two thumb screws, not captive. Back panel away, plain steel, nothing special. So the power supply cover is ventilated. You also have an opening so you can see the logo of your power supply. Power supply slips in from the rear. On the back side we have two SSD caddies, could be used for laptop drives if you prefer. Here we have a drive tower with two drive caddies, accommodate 2.5, 3.5, so that's a total of 4 SSDs or hard drives you can install if you like. These rails can be removed if you want to open up the bottom for cable management or to give yourself space for a radiator. Cable management on the rear is the classic Phanteks hook and loop. This is the older system, so you have to feed the strap through there, like so. These days they have just a post so you can wrap it around real quick. Nonetheless, this works well. That's the RGB connections for the Phanteks lighting system. Pull off the front panel to reveal the two fans. Front panel, so optical drive bay cover. We have an optical drive bay mount inside, which is quite unusual in this day and age. The front filter unclips from the inside. So to clean the filter, you have to pull off the front panel, which was as easy as you saw. Unclip the filter, you can give it a good clean. The optical drive bay, you can remove it, is simply screwed in place. If you want to open up the front for a radiator or for extra cooling, you can. That plate there removes, that's just screwed in place. You can install either a 280mm or 360 rad in the front, 280 or 360 in the roof. As you've got the 140 fans installed, common sense says on the front you go for units of 140. The roof, on the other hand, there you have the options. While this is a relatively budget case, it still has nifty features to cater for the enthusiast. So if we undo these two screws, which are shiny, probably stainless rather than black, which is all the what all the other screws are. These are the two that stand out as being different. And around the back side, we remove these 3 shiny screws. And with a bit of a fight, we can pull out the top radiator rack. I did actually take a bit of a pull. So if you want to install cooling in the roof, whether it's an all-in-one or indeed a custom loop, you can remove the rack or just slide it out, put the rad in place and the fan, slide it back. On the top, we have a magnetic dust filter, heavily perforated for maximum airflow. And at the rear also, plenty of perforations. At the rear we have a filter that goes under the power supply, so you can have the intakes on the bottom, but you also have the option of having the intake on the top because it's perforated, so your power supply can be either way up. With the chassis stripped down, I've left that cover plate in place and I haven't removed the optical drive bay. You can see it is a regular mid-tower ATX chassis that can accommodate a small eATX if you choose. You've got plenty of options for mounting extra storage or cooling. Quite a lot of perforation, therefore you'd expect ventilation to be quite decent. Around the rear you've got the hook and loop system, and there you have extra cable management space that Phanteks tells us is 35mm deep. So yes, it's a regular ATX chassis, but they've definitely given some thought to the important details. And I've literally just found this logo plate stuck up there that quite clearly should go there. Most of the RGB you can see here is provided by those two Halos fan frames up the front. However, the power button in the top of the case also has an RGB function. The Halos fan frames cost £10 to £15 depending on the size, 120mm or 140mm. That's the basic model in plastic. There's also a luxe version made from aluminium, which is more like £20 a piece. And it is literally a plate that sits in front of the fan and it has RGB. It plugs into the Phanteks ecosystem of RGB using the standard Phanteks connector. So as far as the case is concerned, the fan frames are exactly the same as this RGB strip here. Let me just connect this to that connector there. I've currently got the lighting rotating through the different colours of the RGB. There are 10 different colours in total, and you can see that it's all synchronised beautifully. There is, as you can see, there's no motherboard in the case at the moment. This function is entirely controlled by the Phanteks system and that button on the front I/O panel, and you can toggle that a number of ways. First, I'm just going to put the front panel back on the case, as the lighting is, after all, intended to be diffused by the front panel and also by the side glass of the case. Toggling through the RGB function, so if we get a 2-second press, and now we're in a static colour, and a quick press, and we can cycle through the various colours. 1, 2. So that's a pulse we've got at the moment, and again, quick press and we can go to a different colour, and it's now going to pulse in that colour. 1, 2. And there we have it cycling through the colours. Despite the apparent simplicity, this is actually quite a sophisticated system. So if we take this strip and add on this extra device here, et voila, we now have an RGB pump reservoir unit. Clearly you are buying into the Phanteks system of RGB. These are proprietary connectors, but it is self-evident it works really well. It's clear that in this special edition version of the Pro M that Phanteks is putting a great deal of emphasis on the RGB in those two Halos fan frames. So it looks like I'd better do some research. I may be a kit guru, but am I an RGB guru? I knew just the person to ask for a second opinion. Nada of TECHTESTERS. Nada, what do you think about RGB in a PC build? I could not have said it better myself. Marcus Cole of PC Centric recently did a video with a hardline tubing build using a white PC chassis. Marcus, what do you think about RGB?
I actually am a huge fan of RGB. I think it definitely is going a little bit overboard. I mean, yes, RGB SSDs can look great in the exact right place in your case and the exact right orientation and all of that stuff, but it's a little bit pointless really to throw all of this extra money at RGB components when realistically we should be focusing in on just the performance side of things really, and then adding a few RGB extras later to make everything look a little bit better.
Watching Marcus on camera, it's like a younger and much thinner version of myself. I know what I think about the RGB in this Phanteks, but the queen of RGB at Kit Guru is Bryony. Bryony, what's your take on RGB in a PC build?
So pretty.
That's quite enough of that. Time to build a PC. I made life considerably easier for myself during this build by removing hardware I just didn't need. So there's the optical drive bay that I think I could have just snuck in above the radiator. Here are the support rails that form the drive cage in the bottom of the case. The two caddies slide in like so, didn't need those either. And here is the blanking plate that I had to remove because the rad sits down in the bottom of the case. And yes, I'm going to be the first to admit that I've gone completely over the top of this build because I wanted the liquid cooling and the RGB-ness. I actually think this chassis would work perfectly well with a 120mm air cooler on the processor. The test system I have built consists of Intel Core i9-9900K on an Asus ROG Maximus 11 formula motherboard with 16GB Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 3200 MHz. The CPU block is a Phanteks Glacier C360i, graphics card Founders Edition RTX 2080 wearing a Phanteks Glacier block with backplate. The rad at the front of the chassis is an Alphacool Nexus ST3280mm. The reservoir is a Phanteks Glacier R220C and it has a DDC pump. All the fittings are Phanteks 16mm along with some soft tubing, and I've used Corsair XL5 clear coolant. The SSD that you can't see because it's an M.2 and it's under a heat shield is an Intel 760p 1TB. The power supply, which suits this build absolutely perfectly, is a Seasonic Snow Silent Platinum 650 watt. As you saw, I consulted with a number of tech tubers about the RGB in the Phanteks Pro M SE, but now it was time to roll out the big guns. I consulted with Steve Burke of gamersnexus. As we know, Steve has a stellar reputation both for thermals and also about cooling.
Actually quite cold.
Steve is the ideal man to answer a serious question. Steve, what do you think about me using this FLIR thermal camera to assess the thermals of my PC that's behind this tempered glass panel? Well, that was succinct, wasn't it? Have 25 of your US dollars and let's plant some trees together. What is $25 these days? £1.50? £500? Who knows? When it comes to the thermals of the Pro M SE, the biggest single problem I have is my i9-9900K. It's clearly suffering with age. The thermals are not good. 4.7 GHz all cores, temperatures are fine. Push it a bit to say 4.9, temperatures not good. On the verge of throttling, get it to 5 GHz. Really not good. It was interesting to me that in this chassis the processor was relatively hot, however the graphics card, my RTX 2080 with the Phanteks block on it, icy cold, and that's indicative of what the thermals are doing in this chassis. I also found it interesting that having the two fans up the front helps temperatures because obviously I've got the radiator mounted to them. I didn't feel the need to add an exhaust fan either here at the back or on the top, or indeed two on the top. I could have done it quite easily. It would have obviously helped temperatures. It would have also, I'm quite certain, made the case noisier. It is heavily perforated. There's no noise deadening material whatsoever. And having a fan there or just under this filter, without a shadow of a doubt, it's going to, bring up the noise levels. Because I'm running liquid cooling, keeping the fans in the front works. Were I running an air cooler, I think I may well have wanted to shift one of the two fans into the roof if the tower's blowing to the rear, because that will pretty much exhaust on its own. But if you're running an air cooler, I do think moving one of the fans is probably going to be a good idea. In this configuration, the way it works, yes, happy. Why would you buy a Pro M in 2019, late 2019? I don't have an answer for that other than to say optical drive bay. If you want an optical drive bay, this case is a decent case, and despite the fact it's now antique, the case is surprisingly good. The optical drive bay is a feature you don't get in an awful lot of cases these days. I personally haven't used an internal optical drive in years. I rarely use my external CD burner these days. If you are considering buying this case to add an optical drive, I'm just going to offer a word of advice based on my own experience in the past, which is many optical drives, you insert them from the front, screw them in, connect the cables, all good. If you want to remove the front panel to get to the filter to give it a clean, you may well find you have to release the optical drive because the bezel holds it in place, holds the front panel in place. That's just a word of advice, worth checking before you press ahead. Not the end of the world, it's just a bit, yeah. So optical drive could be the reason. Beyond that, if you own a Pro M case and you want to give it a bit of bling update, by all means add Halo's fan frames to give it the RGB. If you have Pro M, I can see why you'd stick with it. But would you buy a Pro M in 2019? I'm going to say probably not. And the most likely reason to not buy a Pro M is because Phanteks has brought out their Eclipse range over the past few years. We have got down at the bottom of the range, the P300 is £55, the P350X with digital RGB, £65. The basic Eclipse P400 Air is £65. And the P400 with digital RGB, £85. In other words, they're all cheaper than the Pro M, which is exactly the reason why Phanteks developed the Eclipse range, because they're cheaper to produce, because they've been designed to use fewer materials and fewer processes, and they deliver on that big time. Eclipse, cheap. So should you buy a Pro M now? I honestly cannot recommend it. It's a decent case, but Phanteks beats it quite deliberately with their own products. On the other hand, I'm really glad to see that Pro M hasn't been delisted, because it still does a proper job. And they've obviously got the tooling and such like, so why not keep on churning them out? If the customers want them, keep on buying them. The update they've given it with the white interior and the Halo's fan frames is clearly a simple thing to do for them. The way I've built this PC, by ripping out the drive caddies down the bottom, opening up the bottom of the chassis for more cable space and such like, I've actually demonstrated, kind of inadvertently, just how much space there is in this chassis to stash extra cables and such like. If on the other hand you want to put drives down the bottom, there is still sufficient space. This is not a shrunk wrap case of the type we sometimes complain about. There is plenty of space in here for a proper sized motherboard, a proper cooling system, a proper graphics card. You do have to pick and choose a little bit. Do you want loads of storage? Do you want loads of cooling? How do you want to go about it? By using the 280 rad at the front, I've dropped it down into the bottom of the case, and therefore I've taken up that area. Also, the original fan mounting system up the front, these screws go into female threads in the core chassis. Moving to a radiator at the front, I've had to shift the fans upwards, because you then mount the fans on slots in the chassis. So the screws go through the fans, through the slots, into the radiator, which means it's shifted upwards somewhat. You don't get a lot of leeway in the positioning of the 280 radiator. It's pretty much going there, and I think I could have moved it maybe 5 mil, not even a centimetre. You don't get a lot of latitude, but you don't require a lot of latitude. There is space inside this case to put your hardware in without difficulty. Also around the back, the cable management works perfectly well. Again, the cable management, I like it. When I first saw the cable management that Phanteks introduced with the Pro M back in 2015, I was blown away. It wasn't the sort of thing we were used to seeing. However, Phanteks has again moved on to their current system that we've seen in the Evolve X and the Lux 2, which is just absolutely excellent. The idea you can bring out cable management and then you can advance the craft, I'm impressed by that. Looking at the Pro M here, it is now looking rather old school by Phanteks standards, although it still beats various of its competitors. Overall, Pro M, I'm glad it still exists in this day and age. I would feel no need to rush out and buy one myself when you consider the alternatives you have, particularly in the Eclipse range, or if you go further up the product chain to the P600, the Evolve X, or indeed the Lux 2 if you're going for a completely different kind of PC build. Pro M is decent. I don't think in this day and age I'd recommend it over the alternatives, but the fact it still exists gladdens my heart. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, head off, click some links and go and see our friends who did the cameos earlier in this video. Hit the bell button, subscribe, will alert you to new videos as they become available. I'm Leo Wood for Kit Guru. This is the Phanteks Pro M Special Edition.